Hello, hello. Thank you, Reverend Edner. Thank you, President Nawakimi, and everybody. Take a moment, turn your face away from what you're looking at right here, sex, true love, and marriage, and just look at everybody that's here. All the different colors, all the different cultures. I love the way Reverend Edner said it. We are 175 homes. You can't even get that. If we were here just individuals, it would just be individuals, but we're homes, and many of you are couples together. This is an incredible experience. I'm happy to be here. My breakout was so much fun. I'm so glad we did that. I met amazing people. So let's get started. My name is Joshua Holmes. I am the director of the Young Christian Leadership Conference, a project of the Family Federation. And the Family Federation can very easily be identified by this logo, beautiful family logo here. And I welcome you to our seminar, Sex, True Love, and Marriage, a 43-day journey to restore true love. The purpose of this seminar is, first of all, to acknowledge the difficult situation that we are now in as people and as a nation. And the second reason is to lay down, based on that understanding of the difficulties we're facing, then lay down some common sense principles, and from there offer a realistic vision for achieving peace. But not just a vision. Of course, we want to provide the actual steps that will make things better. And those steps begin with a 43-day journey. And those 43 days are not just you sitting like you will be a little bit today, just listening to lectures, but it's 43 days of reflection, for some prayer, for some engaging with our spouses and engaging our families, where we take specific action steps that enable us to restore true love in our lives. We're part of a bigger movement, the blessing movement. And one of our goals is to reach 1 million couples in America, taking them through the blessing experience. You are part of that 1 million. And in going through that blessing experience, which we'll explain later in the seminar, we intend to uplift and renew the culture of this nation, starting with us. So let's get started with it. Sex, true love, and marriage. This first session, we're going to be focusing on the family in crisis, the need for a marriage movement. I want to begin with this expression: without vision, the people perish. Do you agree with this? Some of you may recognize it. It comes from the Bible, Proverbs 29:18. But today, when we look around us at the situation of our nation at large, this image of a people united based on a common vision is increasingly difficult to find. And instead, we see increased division between the very rich and the very poor, between political parties, between contradictory viewpoints and opinions held by people who seem unable to listen to one another. And it's not just something we see on the news, it's something we experience even in our own families. And on top of that, we see tensions increasing between races. And even though we're closer than we've ever been and connected better than we've ever been through online systems, programs, and devices, we're more alienated than we've ever been from each other. And we take the example of the dramatic increase in the rates of depression that we see. In this study from the Blue Cross Blue Shield, which focused on the rate of change for major depression from 2013 to 2016, 2013 being the orange bar, 2016 being the blue bar, there was an increase in major depression in every age group from 12 to 64 years of age. But most tragically, is a 63% in the children, the 12 to 17-year-olds. So we mentioned that we've had these divisions. We don't have the common vision that binds us together and unites us. But let's pause for a moment to consider this question. Why do nations and civilizations decline and even at times collapse? There are many factors. But a key point is that when a nation and the civilization prospers and advances and builds higher towers and wider buildings, at the same time, The seeds of destruction are always still there. And this is because with prosperity and economic development, people more easily give in to their selfish desires. And this leads to moral collapse. And you may ask, why does this happen? Why does this occur? It's because that when people are pursuing prosperity, they are doing so without principles. And without fundamental underlying principles to guide us, we have a strong tendency to become incredibly selfish. This is in fact a lesson that we learn throughout history. I take this example of Lord Sachs, who was awarded the Templeton Prize in 2016. And amongst all of his studies, he comes to this conclusion that empires fall because of a rampant immorality. The decline and fall of both Greek and Roman empires was attributed to falling birth rates because nobody wanted the responsibility of bringing up children. That's what caused these empires to fall. Or you look at Arnold Toynbee, a British historian who drew this conclusion, that out of the 21 notable civilizations of history, 19 of them perished not by conquest from without, but by moral decay from within. It came from within, the individuals and the families that make up these civilizations' moral decay. And we see this. We consider this fact that since 1973, the number of abortions in the United States has reached 60 million. Do you think that this number is a sign of a healthy civilization? No, it tells us something is seriously astray, and there are other signs that we as a culture are headed in this off direction. We look at the number of suicides in the United States. 29,300 people died by suicide in 1999. But then in 2018, that number's increased to 48,300, and now suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst youth 15 to 24 years of age. Or we look at the drug problem in the United States, where according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, more than 760,000 people have died since 1999 from a drug overdose. But in 2019 alone, there were over 70,000 people who died. And in that same year, 10 million people misused prescription opioids. This is what we're facing in our society today. These are big issues, but it's not the biggest. We share some of these serious problems that our nation is facing, but there is a problem that has been undermining the most fundamental foundations of our communities and of our nation. And that's the decline and the breakup of the family. The family is necessary. It's the building block, the foundation for healthy community, healthy nations, and healthy world. And as the family declines, so also will the nation. And we're here to tell you why that is. We began with this quote, "Without vision, the people perish." And at the root of vision, this word here, at the root of vision are values that we cherish as people. That's what establishes our vision. So where do our values come from? Well, our most basic values in our life can be found in the family. We can call them family-based values, and they include honoring your parents. That's one of the 10 commandments of Abrahamic faith. So maintaining sexual purity before marriage, honoring marriage itself, remaining faithful, fidelity to your spouse, raising children with guiding principles, with limitations as well, because children need a certain level of discipline. But in the 1960s, we had what has been called the sexual revolution, which with it came a steep decline in the family. And now what we see are children having multiple parents, and they have parents who broke their oath, and they have stepfathers and stepmothers who they don't feel they would ever need to honor. And instead of purity, premarital sex is accepted or even expected. And marriage is not seen as a commitment to be honored, and divorce is seen as being something perfectly normal. And more children now are raised without principles or clear limits, and they suffer because of it. I take, for example, this quote from the American Psychological Association that states, healthy marriages are good for couples' mental and physical health, but they are also good for children. Growing up in a happy home protects children from mental, physical, educational, and social problems. However, about 40 to 50% of married couples in the United States divorce. The divorce rate for subsequent marriages is even higher. So we consider the change in the divorce rate over the years. And in 1950, at the start of the sexual revolution, 20% of marriages ended in divorce. It's amazing. We could even think just 50, 70 years ago, the number was that small. But in 1980, it went up to 50%, and it doubled. This is after the sexual revolution. And since that time, it has declined. So before everybody jumps up in joy and celebrates that the number has decreased, let's first acknowledge that that number is not small. That's still 41%. And the other thing is that we've drawn a conclusion that why the number has decreased is because we have an increasing number of people who are no longer marrying, but they're still having relationships. They're still giving birth to babies, but instead they are cohabitating. They're simply just living together. And as a result, we have a shocking number of children who are born with homes without fathers. Here's a quote from the New York Times, the downside of cohabiting before marriage. And it states that cohabitation in the United States has increased by 1,500% in the past half century. So according to the CDC and prevention, the percentage of children born to single mothers in 1950 was 4%. In 1980, it went to 28%. And today, it's at 40%. That means that 1 out of every 3 children live with an unmarried parent. 1 out of 3 children live with an unmarried parent. And we are now on this continuous trend. And what we're here to say is that this trend is catastrophic. And it will be the destruction of our nation from within. So we take from this book, Why Marriage Matters. And the author, his name is Glenn Stanton. And he says and states, there is a mountain of scientific evidence in published literature over the past few decades proving that marriage matters. Let's go over a few of those points together. The first is that marriage reduces the risk of poverty for children and communities. We consider this fact, that marriage reduces child poverty. 8.4% of children raised in married couple families grow up in poverty. In contrast to that, 40.7% of children raised in single mother families will grow up in poverty. That's 5 times more. Do we take a moment to grasp the impact that has on a child's life? It's huge. To be born and raised in poverty increases the probability of kids doing poorly in school, getting involved in crimes, gangs, increased drug use, and high-risk behavior. This is what we're facing. But at this point, I want to acknowledge something very important. And that's that single mothers and fathers who work so hard to raise their children by themselves are to be honored and admired for that heroic effort. We're not here to shame. We're not here to shame at all. We may look at these statistics, but this is a heroic effort. It is not easy. But if we want to make things better, if we look at our children and we consider the children in our world and we want to build them a better world for the future, we have to be honest about our current reality and what we're seriously facing. So marriage matters. Number 2, because marriage protects the physical and mental health of our children. And along with this trend of single-parent household comes a dramatic trend in child abuse. So we see this diagram. In the orange here are children who are born and are living with their married biological parents. And the rest are situations where it's not so. And the physical, sexual, and emotional abuse levels increase dramatically when it's not with married biological parents. That means that we are losing youth to abuse at rates that are incredible right now. And this is personal. I want you to take a moment and I want to personally ask you, do you know these children? Have you seen them? Have you interacted? Are you a teacher? Are you someone that interacts with them? Are you a parent? Are you someone who's experienced it in your own life? This is personal, and we know the impact it has. So marriage matters because as the number of homes without fathers increase, so does violent crime. And I read statistics on fatherless children in America and juvenile crime and family structure and the correlation that young men who grow up in homes without fathers are twice as likely to end up in jail as those who come from traditional two-parent families. Those boys whose fathers were absent from the household had double the odds of being incarcerated, even when other factors such as race, income, parent education, and urban residence were held constant. So marriage matters. And the book comes to this conclusion, that marriage matters because marriage is the glue that holds society together. It's what holds us together. It's what holds the family together. And we come to this conclusion with the 100 family and legal scholars in the report that came from the Institute of American Values. That's the well-being of society and children depends on the health of our marriage culture. So how is our marriage culture in America today? When marriages fail, or when there is no marriage, it impacts our society. And I want you to consider a young man, a high school dropout, grew up in poverty, physically and sexually abused, and because of that has serious emotional problems and is at present in prison for a felony, and ask yourself, what are the odds that he grew up in a healthy and intact family? The odds are almost zero. Which brings us to the purpose of sex, true love, and marriage, this vision for peace that we are sharing with you today in this seminar. We can show the statistics and the information, but what it all boils down to is one simple truth, that a vision for peace is a vision of healthy marriages and families. And our task and purpose is to shine a light on the universal principles that are needed in order for us to transform the institution of marriage and family in America today. And when we heal the family, we will naturally solve most of those problems and divisions that we are facing in our communities and our nation. Think about for a moment our children and what we want to leave behind for them, what we want to create for them, the lifestyle and the future that we want them to inherit from us. That is why we are here. And I love the way Father Moon describes the purpose of marriage. So beautiful. Read this with me out loud. No one unmute, but let's read it out loud. Marriage is more than a simple coming together of a man and a woman. Through marriage, a new future is created. Societies are formed. Nations are built. God's world of peace is realized with married families at the center. Marriage is sacred. It is worthy to be praised, honored, and upheld in our world today. So we're concluding this session, but before we go into any breakouts or any discussion, I would like to briefly share with you where this all came from. And this is Father Moon and Mother Moon's heart. They wanted to build this kind of world. So I want to share their story with you just lightly before we go into these principles and the origin of where these principles come from. So the Blessing Movement began with Reverend Samyel Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, whom we affectionately refer to as Father and Mother Moon. And they were blessed in marriage in 1960, right when the sexual revolution began. They were born not more than 30 miles apart from each other along the same river in North Korea, the northern part of Korea, before it became North Korea. And they were born on the same day of the lunar calendar, although in different years. Father Moon in 1920 in Jeongju, that's his house there, and Mother Moon in Shin-uri-ri in 1943. And at that time of Father Moon's birth in Korea, they were under military occupation from imperialist Japan. And the suffering of the Korean Christians under Japanese was terrible. And many who refused to worship the Japanese emperor were imprisoned, put to death. And so Father Moon was desperate to figure out why a God of love, being a Christian, why a God of love would allow such evil to dominate the world. So a young Father Moon went to the mountains to pray. And this is the mountain that he prayed at, Mount Myodu. And on Easter morning of 1934, while he was in prayer and desperately asking God, why are my people suffering? He had a profound experience with Jesus. And he recalls that experience. It was the night before Easter in the year I turned 16. I was on Mount Myodu praying all night and begging God in tears for answers. Why had he created a world so filled with sorrow and despair? Why was the all-knowing and all-powerful God leaving the world in such pain? Why? What should I do for my tragic homeland? I wept in tears as I asked these questions repeatedly. And he went on to share that Jesus appeared before me. He appeared in an instant like a gust of wind and said to me, God is in great sorrow because of the pain of humankind. You must take on a special mission on earth having to do with heaven's work. So this experience with Jesus changed his life. And over the next 10 years, he devoted himself in a search for that truth, the truth that would bring peace to this world. And through that search, he received new realizations. And for thousands of years, for great faiths of the world had emphasized the path that the individual must walk in order to go to heaven. But what Father Moon received at that time was how important it is to teach the importance of the family. God's kingdom, the world of peace that all people long for, will only be realized when peace, or what some may call heaven, is established in the family. And he declared that message to the world, and he was rejected, he was misunderstood, he was persecuted. The communists who had taken over the North arrested Father Moon and almost beat him to death. And when he recovered, he attempted to continue giving that message to the world and was arrested, and this time sent to a labor camp to die. He only survived because during the Korean War, the UN forces liberated the camp that he was in. And after escaping from prison, he traveled to the south and he built this mud hut out of scrap boxes for a roof. It was a tiny place, and there he began his work, declaring that peace in this world would begin when the family transforms. And at that same time was Mother Moon, who traveled a difficult path herself. She was raised by her mother and her grandmother, both of them devout people of faith, and they too were arrested by communists in North Korea. And like Father Moon, they were able to escape and went on a journey guided by God through the ravages of the Korean War. And eventually, they were guided by heaven to Father Moon's ministry. And there in 1960, Father and Mother Moon were married, but it was not an ordinary marriage. Look at their faces. You can tell it was not about themselves. It was in order to satisfy something greater. They married knowing that a new pattern of marriage must be established in this world, that what Father and Mother Moon were preaching needed to be embodied by them. And as a couple, they determined to devote themselves to that task of bringing God's blessing to all the families on the earth. And although that persecution continued, some of you may know this history. Father Moon never stopped teaching and giving his message. And slowly, people began to understand and to respond. And they started with 36 couples they blessed in marriage in 1961, participating in the ceremony and the 43-day journey to restore their true love. And in the following years, 72, then 124, 430, 777, 100, 1800, 8,000, and then finally in 1992, 30,000 couples gathered from all around the world at the Olympic Stadium in Seoul, Korea. But what was beautiful was that they were all of different backgrounds of faith. Christians of various denominations, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims, all gathered to honor marriage. And that's the beauty of this 43-day journey that you're on to restore your true love, is that everyone is welcome. And when public blessing ceremonies are held, we have ministers of all different faith traditions bless and pray over those couples. And this is because the blessing of marriage and family is bigger than any one religion. You don't need to change or leave your faith tradition in order to participate in the blessing. Not at all. The purpose of the blessing is to create a heavenly family. That's why it's so beautiful that we're 193 homes coming together from all different backgrounds and cultures. Because if we can grow and embrace all, man, we'll start to change the culture of this nation. Can you imagine it? That's what we're a part of. And now we know in September of 2012, Father Moon passed to the spiritual world at the age of 92. And he fulfilled his mission that God gave him, bringing God's message to the world, living a life of true love together with Mother Moon, giving the marriage blessing to the entire world to establish God's family. And since his passing, Mother Moon has continued that work, going out on to the world, doing speaking tour again and again and again to share to all humanity this good news that we can bring about a world of peace, one family at a time. This is Madison Square Garden, 10,000 people in New York City. And here she's speaking to 100,000 people gathered to receive the marriage blessing in South Africa. And this is from her memoir. My path has been one of raising up every valley and making every mountain and hill low. From the day of our holy wedding, my husband and I traveled the world so that all people will see God's salvation. We visited every country, moving so quickly that I hardly had time to take off my shoes. So although the marriage blessing ceremony and 43-day journey is the centerpiece of their ministry to bring peace to the world, they understood that the work goes beyond that the social environment of the world must also be transformed in order for families to genuinely prosper. And for that reason, they founded many organization institutions for social change. Some of those were education facilities. This is Sun Moon Academy for the children, Chongshim International Middle School and High School, Sun Moon University for university students, Chongshim Divinity Graduate School, and in America, they founded the Unification Theological Seminary. In the arts, they founded the Little Angel School, where they perform arts, folk ballet, to honor God and Korean culture. Universal Ballet Company, even in the realm of media, organizations like the Washington Times, Seigye Ilbo, Sekai Nippo, and the Middle Eastern Times. And in medicine as well, building hospitals like the H.J. Magnolia Hospital in Korea, uniting Eastern and Western medicine together. And in 1992, Mother Moon founded the Women's Federation for World Peace, which is an international women's organization working to promote the role of women, heavenly women, in creating a peaceful world. This is the age of women. Amen. Reaching top women leaders from around the world, championing leadership of heart, family and marriage values, and peace building. And there's CARP, an international collegiate association, and YSP as well, that is active in college campuses and in governments and nations around the world, committed to bringing God back to students through service and transformative seminars. And in 2020, the Universal Peace Federation, founded by Father and Mother Moon, brought delegates, 6,000 delegates, parliamentarians, religious leaders, leaders in the field of education, media, business, from 170 countries, including current and former heads of state at the World Summit. And one of those speakers was the UN former Secretary General, where he states this: for Mother Moon, to create a world of peace in which all people live as one family is not some future reality she is waiting for or hoping will appear. No, for her, it is a calling that God has given to her, a vision that we must work together to make a reality. So we thank you for participating in this first session with us. I'm excited to be here with you. This next session, we'll introduce the universal principles that will guide us along this journey of sex, true love, and marriage so that we can begin to change the future for our children and the culture of America and begin building healthy and heavenly families. God bless you. Thank you.